When someone manipulates you, do you actually know is happening? Yes, it probably feels like a normal conversation, a friend being helpful, a partner being concerned. But behind those everyday moments, there's something deeper that most people completely miss. The Stoics understood this over 2,000 years ago. They knew the most dangerous forms of control don't announce themselves. They look like kindness. They look like love. And if you misunderstand them, which most people do, you could be surrendering your freedom without ever realizing it was taken. Let's start with the first way they do it. Point 1. Destroy the obvious explanation. So why would someone constantly do you favors you never asked for? Most people assume it's generosity. They care. End of story. But here's the thing, if genuine care was the motive, they wouldn't keep score. They wouldn't bring it up when you say no. So why do they keep doing it for you specifically? Because what they're building is a reciprocity trap. Every unsolicited gift creates an invisible debt in your mind. You didn't agree to owe anyone anything, but psychologically you already do. Seneca once warned that a gift that cannot be refused is not a gift, it's a chain. He saw this constantly in Roman politics. The senator funding your rise isn't being generous, he's purchasing your obedience. 2,000 years later, the mechanism hasn't changed. And by the way, if someone who's been generous suddenly stops cold, don't brush it off. We'll get into what that really means at the end, and it's something most people wish they'd understood sooner. Point 2. Reveal the hidden mechanism. Have you ever noticed that certain people give you warmth in unpredictable waves? One week they're fully present, the next, silence, no explanation, just absence. That's not random, it's strategic. What you're experiencing is called intermittent reinforcement. It's the same mechanism behind gambling addiction. The reward is inconsistent, and that inconsistency is exactly what keeps your brain locked in. Here's what most people don't realize. When someone cycles between warmth and withdrawal, they're not being moody. They're conditioning you. Your nervous system starts tracking their emotional state more closely than your own. Epictetus taught that no one can disturb your peace unless you hand them the power to do so. But intermittent reinforcement is precisely how that handover happens. Gradually, invisibly, one unpredictable cycle at a time. This is also why that one unreliable person somehow occupies more mental space than the friend who's been steady for years. Point 3. The power/status angle. Ever wonder why the most powerful figures in history rarely explained themselves? Maybe it's the emperor who issued orders with no context. Maybe it's the general who answered questions with silence. Maybe it's that one person in your life who never justifies their choices and everyone still follows. That pattern isn't random, it's strategic. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journals that a person's strength is measured not by how forcefully they speak, but by how comfortably they hold silence. The person who feels compelled to explain everything is the person who doubts their own authority. Sun Tzu understood that the greatest victories are won without the opponent realizing a battle took place. In everyday life, this manifests as strategic ambiguity. By withholding explanation, they force you to fill the gap with your own assumptions, and you almost always fill it in their favor. Watch how someone uses silence. If they pause after a request instead of explaining, they're testing your compliance. If they share just enough to move you, but not enough for you to question, they're controlling the frame. If they answer your concern with a calm stare and nothing else, they're letting your own discomfort do the work. And hey, if this is making you see everyday conversations differently right now, smash that like button and subscribe. It's the best way to help us reach more people who actually care about understanding the psychology behind everyday life. Point 4. The breakdown/typology. Does the person manipulate through guilt, through flattery, through fear, or through silence? Each tells you something completely different. Guilt is the most common form. They remind you of their sacrifices. They frame your boundaries as betrayal. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you should never let another person's opinion of your choices disturb your inner calm. But guilt manipulators bypass that by making their opinion feel like your own conscience, and flattery is subtler. They praise you constantly, your judgment, your intelligence. But the praise isn't about you. It's about making you depend on their approval. Epictetus taught that if you take pride in qualities that belong to others' opinions, you will grieve when those opinions change. The moment their praise stops, you feel diminished, not because you changed, but because their mirror did. Fear is the most aggressive form. They don't threaten with fists, they threaten with consequences. You'll regret this. Nobody else would tolerate you. Seneca warned that the person who can make you afraid has already conquered you, because fear rearranges your priorities before you even notice. And then there's silence. The most powerful manipulation of all. They withdraw completely. No conflict, just absence, and that absence forces you to chase, to question yourself, to adjust in hopes of getting their presence back. They achieve total influence without speaking a single word. Point 5. The behavioral shift. Have you ever noticed that you start editing yourself around someone who uses these tactics? You're more careful with your words. You rehearse what you'll say. You check their mood before deciding whether to speak. That's not a coincidence. It's a behavioral shift they engineered. Epictetus taught that we are disturbed not by things, but by our judgments about things. The manipulator didn't change your world. They changed your judgment of it. They made you believe that managing their emotional state is your responsibility. Researchers studying coercive control found that prolonged exposure to manipulation rewires decision-making. You stop asking, "What do I need?" and start asking, "What will keep them stable?" Think about that for a second. Your entire way of making decisions, built over a lifetime, gets quietly rewritten because someone applied these tactics with enough patience. Point 6. They already know your weakness. Ever had a rough week and noticed someone increase the flattery or deepen the silence right when you needed stability most? That's not a coincidence. They knew something was off before you said a word. They pick up on micro-signals. The shift in your response time. The way your voice flattens when you're drained. The pause before you say, "I'm fine." They don't know every detail, but they know something shifted. And here's where it gets even deeper. The longer someone is in your life, the more emotional data they collect. They learn your baseline. And when something breaks from that baseline, they notice. Not because they're inherently cruel, but because your moment of weakness is the exact window where their influence works best. Marcus Aurelius understood this. He wrote that you must be like the rocky promontory against which the waves crash endlessly. It stands firm, and the fury eventually falls still. The manipulator is counting on you to not be that rock. Point 7. The reversal. What does it mean when someone who's been generous for months suddenly stops? This is what I mentioned earlier, and it's something everyone needs to understand. If someone has been building a reciprocity trap and then goes cold, don't just accept it, question it. People are creatures of pattern. When they break one this deliberately, they're trying to accomplish something. Sometimes the reason is strategic. The debt is deep enough, and now it's time to collect. They'll ask for something big, and your accumulated guilt will make it almost impossible to refuse. Other times it's need-based. They've found someone more responsive. You became too aware, and they moved to easier ground. And sometimes it's cyclical. They withdraw just long enough for you to feel the loss, then return with double the warmth. This is the most damaging pattern of all, because each cycle tightens the bond while weakening your independence. It's intermittent reinforcement at its most refined. The Stoic response? Seneca wrote that the wise person expects the blow before it lands, not out of paranoia, but out of clarity. The Stoics didn't teach distrust. They taught clear sight, observe without reacting, recognize without being consumed, because that manipulation, it was never invisible to them, and it shouldn't be invisible to you either.